and I was bottom of the class. And there's no way of getting around that. You know, you have to accept the fact that people are brighter than you. But that spurs you on as well, because you think, Christ, how am I going to make any money? I can't go to university. I'm virtually unemployable. I need to kick on.
Hi everyone, my name's Zee Razaq and we've got a special episode 7, if I get this right. Oh, the 6 there.
You're an accountant, you should get it right.
I love that. That's what I'm talking about. Even in the intro, the audience are going to get involved because of John. This is going to be a special edition around our Next Level Finance podcast, and we're going to give an intro into what this is going to be, giving us huge value. And we've got the legendary John Howard, who loves me calling him that.
He only calls me that because I'm old.
No, it's because he's wise. And this is what's going to be a difference in this one. Get ready for the huge value. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for making it, John.
It's a pleasure.
You always humble us with your presence and the knowledge that you give. And I always like meeting people like John, who are one of the industry leaders, experts in property. There's not many of them running around, and everyone watches me, knows that I don't blow smoke up someone's where for no reason. So we are here to make sure we add value, illustrate John's journey, which is going to be hugely valuable. And I love listening to entrepreneurs like John. So John, are you ready for the roller coaster of the Next Level Finance podcast?
I'm ready.
I love it. And when he smiles, you know he's ready. Right. We're going to start with, first of all, obviously, the audience always want to know a bit about the person and what made them who they are, what have they learned in their journey. So we're going to start with some personal challenges, because people love that. And one of the things that I didn't actually know until we were having the chat earlier, and you gave me a bit of insight, you told me a little bit, going to bring it out in our Next Level Finance podcast. You said you had a stutter and a stammer.
Yeah, stutter and a stammer, yeah. And very interestingly...
Until what age was that?
Up to 19.
Wow.
But my school life really started... so I stammered. People don't know why you stammer. Yeah. But even now, the Stammering Society, I went to see them quite recently, and they depressed me a little bit, because they said, well, you still stammer. I said, no, I don't. They said, yes, you do. You just avoid the words that make you stammer. And if you're a stammerer, you don't stammer when you sing, you don't stammer when you rhyme, you don't stammer when you shout. So I think it's to do with breathing and confidence as well. And a lot of stammerers academically don't do very well at school. And that brings me really to my school days. So I was good at sport, thank goodness.
Any particular sport?
Football, rugby. I played for the county at rugby.
Wow.
Had some football trials, that sort of stuff. But interestingly, I was at a boarding school, and the reason I was at a boarding school was because my grandfather had a shoe shop in Mansfield, and he had 2 boys come into the shop to buy shoes. And in those days, a good pair of shoes was average wage, 1 month's wages for a minor was a good pair of shoes in 1940, whatever it was. And he was so impressed with his 2 boys that went to Gresham School in Norfolk that he vowed he would save enough money with my grandmother to put into a trust. So all 3 he had no grandchildren at the time, but he had 1 daughter, and all 3 of us in the end went to private school because of him and my grandmother.
Right.
So he saved enough money in a trust for us all to go to a private school, to a boarding school. So, but when you've got red hair and you stammer and you're at boarding school, that's a tough gig. And what it does do, it molds your character. So because everyone, takes the mick out of you and everything else because of the situation. And in those days, there was no getting away from it like these days. Things have changed for the good, by the way. So you just have to put up with it, and it molds your character to be affable and relatively easygoing and be able to laugh at yourself. And I think that's very important, very, very important. And it makes you humble as well.
That's amazing insight, because a lot of entrepreneurs that I've met have different challenges, and this is people always. I've realised with entrepreneurs that have to be successful find solutions to problems rather than just concentrating on the problem. They find how can they resolve it and work it in their favour, and that's what I always, when I speak to you, you're always finding solutions to problems, and that's probably one of your major first problems.
Yeah,
right?
I think
or challenges.
Yeah, I think I've got a reputation for buying difficult projects and finding solutions for them. I don't want to buy difficult projects, by the way. It's just what I get offered. There's more margin in them if you get them right. If you get them wrong, you're in trouble. So I mean, but what I would say is, I think most entrepreneurs I've met, and there's some I'm not talking about the super bright ones, because there's some super bright entrepreneurs out there who have made fortunes. But for a lot of us, especially when I started, which was in a estate agency, we'll talk about that in a minute, I know, most of us weren't very bright. And actually, we didn't go to university. We had no chance of going to university. We needed to do something. So you need to sharpen up and find something you could do. And most people, most of my friends who weren't very bright or didn't take life too seriously, ended up as estate agents to start with. And of course, a estate agency is such a good grounding for being a property investor, developer. And that's what's missing now. And what's happened is there's so many more people doing property, and they've all been educated. And you can tell they've all been educated by these property gurus, because of what they come out with. and that's one of the reasons, which we'll go on to later, why I started writing my books and so on, because I was so fed up with some of the, not all the education, some of the education people were getting.
Let's unpack some of that. I think you mentioned quite a lot. So you had the stammer, you overcome that.
Well, I overcame it, but I didn't know how to overcome it, really, apart from when I started work, I wouldn't answer the phone. I didn't like answering the phone, and I would never make a phone call. Wow. So I wasn't a lot of good. So because I stammered, and eventually I got more confident. And by the time I was 19, I left school at 17. By the time I was 19, I believe it virtually 1920 virtually gone.
Yeah.
But if you talk to the Stammering Society, they'll say no, you still stammer.
I wouldn't even known, so I think it has gone. And I think it's confidence, and it's the way you've done that.
It's a lot of confidence.
So
think, yeah.
You at 19, that's a bit of another milestone year for you.
Yeah,
you bought your father's business.
It was, yeah, because my father he was a greengrocer.
Yeah.
In a small town, and then one day he bought an estate agency. So everyone knew him as a greengrocer. And the next day he's valuing property, which is a bit tricky. And he ran it. He didn't buy it till he was 60, and he ran it for 8-9 years, and sort of didn't really need to make a big profit. And it was a one-man band and all the rest of it. And I went, and he'd been ill, so I joined him when I was 17, when I could learn to drive. I left school, and he'd been ill for 4 months, so the business was hardly any business there. And we had a secretary called Mrs. Leader, and in the morning she used to give me spelling tests. And she couldn't believe I was such a bad speller, considering they spent so much on my education. So it was you couldn't, it was, and those days, you locked the office up at lunchtime and walked home. Wow. You walked home at lunchtime, and then I'd constantly be arguing with my father in front of my mother, bless her heart, about we need to modernise the office, we need to do this, need to do that, and he didn't really want to. And anyway, and then on my 18th birthday, I'd already saved a bit of money. My mother lent me a little bit of money, and the bank manager lent me the balance, and I bought 2 properties.
Were they your first 2?
My first 2.
At what age?
At 18, on my 18th birthday.
You're listening to this exclusively. Yeah. John Howard bought his first properties at age 18.
On my birthday.
Wow, on his birthday.
Off a property developer who it was the end of a deal, if you like. So he had 2 sitting, what we have then in those days was sitting tenants. He had 2 sitting tenants left, and he just wanted to chop them out. So he let me buy them. And before I bought them, though, I'd agreed to sell one of them to the tenant at a profit. So that happened really quickly, which left me the other one virtually without any money owing on it. And then so I then moved on to the next one. My mother got her money back. She bought a new kitchen with the money, because my dad was too tight to buy a kitchen for her. So she said, I don't need your money now to buy a kitchen, I'm buying it myself. So, and of course, if you can borrow money, and I was fortunate, you could borrow a bit of money off your family. Always give them a decent return on their money. Don't try and be clever and say, well, it's family, you shouldn't get anything. Because if you give them a decent return, they'll lend you the money again. which is what my mother did. Oh, we'll do another one, shall we?
How much return
so we
did you give her?
So we did 2 or 3. I think I gave her some interest. I think I gave her something like 20% of the deal, so I can't remember now. But
Wow.
she was delighted, she was delighted. And then by the time I was 19, we weren't getting on, my father and I, in terms of business, and he wasn't well either. And he decided to sell the business for £6,000. A little leasehold business, wasn't worth much.
What year was this?
About 1980, 1979, 1980, something like that.
When I came on
81.
Wow.
And so he found a buyer who then wanted me to stay on as the manager. So I thought, well, that's crazy. And the sale fell through. And all I wanted to do was be a property developer. I knew within 2 months the estate agency is a mug's game, really, which is a bit of a joke, because now I own Fine and Country. We got the franchise for whole of Norfolk, so we've got loads of offices, but that's another story. So the sale fell through. He didn't want to sell it to me because he didn't want me to fail, but I had a deal with him, and I bought it off him, and I changed the name immediately to John Howard Estate Agents, and we doubled the turnover the first year, doubled it again the second year. And we did okay, not brilliantly, did okay. And I sold it when I was 24 because I met a Mr. Boyce, who was really one of my backers. And I still do deals with his son today, 35 years later.
Let's break at that point. So, age 19, you bought the business for £6,000 from your father. You doubled it, as you noticed, but there was a major life event which you're happy to share with us. At age 20, which you said to me off here, your role model, your dad, and your grandfather were there, the role models. Unfortunately, your dad passed away.
Yes, he did, yes.
And how did that impact you from someone who you were obviously learning from? Might have different ways of doing it, but obviously you were inspired.
Ways. I mean, he was old-fashioned. He was old in many ways. You know, he was old for his age, if you like. But you know, he believed in saving money. He didn't believe in spending money. The tea bags, he'd hang them up and use them again. And if you wrote on one bit of paper, one side of the paper, he'd get it out the bin and say, hey, right on the other side, what are you wasting money for? So, but that's really good grounding. And actually, because the business wasn't making any money, because we were struggling, that's the best, because you learn the benefits of running a tight ship and all the rest of it. If you're doing well, you know, you do a development and it's easy and everything goes well, you learn nothing. You learn nothing.
Of course.
If it's tough, you learn.
Exactly. And obviously you have that big major life event.
Yes.
And
yes.
I sort of understand this as well from my own experience. But how did that affect you, that you had someone who you could bounce ideas, whether you agree with or not,
no, I agree,
to him leaving, being a role model?
Yeah, well, one of the biggest things was people used to come in and say, you know, is your dad about? No, he died 2 weeks ago. You know, you've got to keep the business going. You can't shut the business, and you've got to keep it all going. And it's a relatively small town, Felixstowe, which is where my office was and where I lived. Was born there. So,
where was that in the country? Sorry,
Felixstowe, Suffolk.
Suffolk. Okay.
Yeah. So, I'm based close by there now. So, you know, that was difficult. It was a difficult time. Of course, my mum, she was a fair bit younger, and I had a younger brother who then decided he'd like to get expelled from 2 schools, so I had to deal with that one, and all the rest of it. So it was a challenging time, but you know, you get through it, and you grow up, and you learn more about yourself and so on, as you did, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What was, I guess, your number one lesson that you felt, because when your dad obviously passed away, what did you have to do that you didn't have to do before? What was the number one big step
I think and you may think the same, I don't know, but I felt I had more responsibility to the family. I had an older sister, so I had to ring her up and say, she was in Bermuda at the time, working out there. So I had to ring up, said, look, Dad's just died. You know, you got all that, you got to organise a funeral because your mum is upset, and your younger brother is too young to do it. So you know, you end up maturing very quickly. I was relatively mature anyway because I was running a business and all the rest of it. But you just grow up a bit quicker, don't you? And you know, and that's just how it goes. You know, it's one of those things, isn't it?
I know this is a bit different, but I always try to understand the personal experience as well. You had those responsibilities, but how did it affect you emotionally yourself? Because the issue a lot of people have, and this is my experience, is that you don't have time for yourself.
I agree.
You end up trying to help others because I've noticed that's quite a similarity that we've got. We naturally try to help others without even thinking about ourselves sometimes, which is strange. People think, well, but that's the lure of certain type of people. And those are the experiences that shape you because you get put in that position to start thinking that way. But sometimes you still need that time for yourself. How did you make time to grieve to then move forward, because you do need that? How did you do that?
I have to say, from memory, I don't remember grieving that much. I was, I was trying to look after the family as best you can, and look after themselves a bit as well, obviously. Running the business, in one way you've got a lot on you. When you have something happen to you like that, having something to focus on actually is pretty good. It's a good thing. And I needed the business to survive. It was early days, and the fear and I said to you, I've always have what drives me on at 61 years old, which I can't believe I'm 61 years old.
Don't look it.
Thank you. What drives me on is the fear of failure. Even now when I've got a number of assets and so on, it's the fear of failure, the fear of not being able to pay the tax at the end of January or whatever, and the fear of not finding any more deals. They always turn up, but yeah.
Do you know what? I think that's a common trait, and if anyone's watching in the audience, one of the biggest traits that you have to have as an entrepreneur is have that fear of failure. And believe me, I've seen anyone who doesn't have that. I'll be honest with you, you will not be an entrepreneur for that long. Because that is the difference maker, because that's what drives you. Whatever you don't, whether for me it was whatever we do in life with the exams or whatever, don't want to fail. How am I going to make it happen? And I think that's the inspiration.
I use the word make it happen because I think my wife says I've only got one skill, and that's dogged determination. Which is interesting because I never thought about that, but actually probably right. I don't look at it that I've got dogged determination, but actually, you've got to make it happen. You've got to, it's no point in sitting there talking about something. You've got to get out there and make it happen.
I think your wife is probably simplifying your skill set, because from knowing you, I think you've got more than just one. I think that may be a defining skill because there's certain traits that decide or distinguish people, but you need so many, and I think we're going to touch on some of the stuff. So you bought the business. I want to touch, you said you're academics, you went to private school, academics,
bottom of the class. No, it interests me. I did my best, but I was bottom of the class.
It wasn't what for you?
No, I just wasn't very bright. And at the end of the day, there's different types of brightness, I believe. There's academic brightness. I mean, my reading was very poor. I had special help with that and so on, and I was bottom of the class, and there's no way of getting around that. You have to accept the fact that people are brighter than you, but that spurs you on as well, because you think, Christ, how am I going to make any money? I can't go to university. I'm virtually unemployable. I need to kick on, and a lot of the people of my generation, property developers of my generation, were very similar. They're very similar. They're not particularly bright. They've got a smartness to them, if you like, street creddy sort of smartness to them, but they're not academically bright. And I do wonder where the young entrepreneurs, property entrepreneurs, are coming from. There's a lot of people doing rent to rent and all this type of stuff, but they don't see many actual developers coming through, which is interesting. I don't know many, and of course that's one of the reasons why we started the Property Graduate, which we'll talk about later, I know.
I want to just unpack what you said, because I think it's so important. I've got a slightly different view on what you define as brightness, because being bright doesn't mean being academically strong, because I've met, and there's someone who's gone all the way, been fortunate, humbled to do that. It doesn't define if you're bright, because I've seen so many people who have gone all the way in academic, but they've got no business sense, no common sense, and that's not defined how good you are at doing exams, and that is how good are you building relationships, how good are you communicating. And I think we get caught up in society, and I'm not knocking education because I'm a big advocate of it, but there's so many different ways to be successful.
Well,
and what I define as brightness, because the brightness for me is the lights on when you're talking to
but
someone.
I would also say that there's people who have got a fantastic job because they're so clever, and they don't need to be entrepreneurs. You know, they don't need to, because they've got a super job, great, they've got loads of money coming in. They don't need to take a risk. Half of them are never taking a risk in their lives, and you don't need to. Great, it's not a problem. So we're all different.
I think you're absolutely right. I think we're a bit, I guess entrepreneurs are a bit unusual because they're risk takers.
Yes.
Yeah? And you have to be, if you want to be a successful entrepreneur.
Yeah, we should get tax breaks for that, shouldn't we? Really? For
Love it.
We should do, because you know we are employing people either directly or indirectly.
Absolutely. I think the United Kingdom is known as a society of entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And the problem we have with, I've got to be careful with, because John is a huge Conservative Party advocate. The current leadership, I think that is somewhere got a bit missed from my perspective.
I totally agree. And at the conference, I shall be, you know, talking to one or two ministers and banging their heads together if I can get hold of them. But especially that Chancellor, goodness me.
I think he's got a tough job, without defending him, but I think he has got a tough job. And I think John, always when I speak to John, he's got such great perspective due to his network, which we're going to touch base later on, is how he looks at problems and solutions and challenges in society, the economy and everything else. And he's also got insight that many others don't, and he's just mentioned some. And I think people really realise that entrepreneurs are the cornerstone of the United Kingdom economy and society. And we need those, otherwise we will not prosper. And I think I'm going to leave that before I get into my tax breaks and all the rest of it. Business challenges.
Yes.
Let's move on to this, because as we love this, time always flies. You mentioned earlier property development, and we were talking off here, is you believe property development is at the hardest point now. It's really hard to be a property developer than anywhere from your career starting. And you've been in the game for 4 decades.
Yeah.
So why do you think that?
Well, I think... well, first of all, funding has got easier, because in the old days you could only borrow 50%. 50% of the purchase price, 50% of the build costs. Now you can borrow probably 70% and all the build costs.
Right.
So the funding's got easier, but of course with that has come a new breed of investor. And until recently, you know, they could borrow, they could refinance and keep it. Now that's not really an option.
Yeah.
And it's the perfect storm. I was talking to a friend of mine who, right, I won't say who they are, but they run one of the top new house builder firms in the UK. And he said, it's impossible at the moment, John. And I agreed with him, because you've got, build costs have gone up 30%.
Yeah.
Interest rates have doubled from where they were 2 years ago for us.
Well, more than doubled.
More than doubled. In others, we were paying 6% 2 years ago. We're now paying 12%. You know, and that's with the clearers, by the way. If you want to, the bridges are some of them, not a lot more. And prices have come down. So that's a perfect storm. So anybody that's been developing in the last 3 years and hasn't finished their projects, most of them, all due respect, are probably what we call underwater.
Right.
They've got to have they must have had a hell of a deal to start with, not being so. So all I've been buying in the last 3 years are properties that have stalled. So we buy them off receivers. We've got 2 in Scotland, schemes, 26 houses and flats in Scotland that was part finished, built, the developer went bust. Another one in Scotland, 12 units, apartments where the builder went bankrupt. In fact, he died of COVID actually, but then went bust. Another one in Birmingham, another one down in Hungerford, another one in Cardiff, and so on. So that's really what we're buying, because on that basis, someone else has taken the hit on the build costs. But even then, you've still got to unravel it. It's still difficult. They're difficult deals to do.
I think you've put it in a nutshell. The strategy changes. And
totally. You've got to be fleet of foot.
And I think you've given huge insight to the audience around how you're thinking about the solution. Because when I speak to, and I've been fortunate, humble enough due to the network that we built up, that we get to speak to quite a lot of industry experts at quite a high level, and they all got different perspectives. A lot of people think this is the best time to be buying property and investing because of what we'll get onto later about whether we're in a recession or not in 2023 as we're recording this podcast. Is everyone has a different perspective depending on what their strategy is, what their property strategy is. I think it varies depending on what you do and what you're comfortable
what I always say is that property is like a big ship. It takes a long time to stop, turn around and go the other way. As soon as the market gets a bit tougher, people like me want to jump in too soon. Because we're at the sharp end. We know what's happening and we want to get in. But actually, sometimes just step back a bit, take a bit of time. There's no rush. Nothing turns around in less than 3 years.
I think you've put that in a nutshell.
So we're looking at a convent at the moment to convert. Now, it will take us a year to get planning, probably. Takes a year to do it. So we're now looking 2 years ahead and saying, will the market be better in 2 years than it is now? What do you think? What do you think? What's your advice?
What my advice to 2 years from now? It depends. What was the property that you're buying?
It's a conversion it will be 28 units.
28 units. What is it currently?
Currently a convent.
Convent. Okay. Okay. Provided you get planning.
Well, we'll get planning. I'm not worried about planning.
That's what John's saying now, the connections. I think it depends on the GDV, and that's what I was going to ask you, what the gross development value is.
14 million.
14 million. And what's the cost you're looking on?
We're in about 9 million plus this, that and the other.
So
it's a decent deal, but what I'm asking you is it's all about time. Property's about timing. And I think if you're looking 2 years ahead, you're probably about right now to start reinvesting in conversions and things like that, because you're 2 years away, but you need to make sure there's a big margin in these deals. Don't bring me deals with 20% margin in them. I'm not interested. I need 35, 40%, because then if it goes wrong or it doesn't happen in 2 years' time, you can still live with it. If you're doing deals at 15, 20%, you've had it. You're underwater from day one virtually. All you need is the build cost to go up 10, 15%, which is very easy, as we all know. Sale prices to go down 5%, and you're in trouble.
Answering your question, I think that's a really great insight. For me, I look at working the GDV and the return. I think you worked out it's excess of 30% if I work at top of my head on 40 million GDV. So 30 to 40%, I would probably be expecting a bit more at the moment. I'll be honest with you. The reason being is financing costs, as you mentioned, have gone out of the roof. So financing costs have gone out of the roof. I will look at negotiating, because normally if you're buying something in distress, right now people need you to buy, because not many people are buying.
No, but you'll be amazed. There's still competition out there.
Depends on what you're buying.
I agree.
And which area it's in. Because
always buy in the best areas. The best areas you can afford. Because those areas, even if the market gets tough, they'll sell first. They always sell first.
I think that is, they say buy the worst house on the best street, right? And I totally agree with that. I think that is a great philosophy, but that comes to network. But also, it depends on the cash position. What can you get from a financing at the right rates? And I think that's the biggest bit people haven't factored in. So a lot of people are selling stuff, thinking they're going to get prices, but any smart property investor or developer is thinking 6 months, 12 months, 2 years in your case, ahead. What is the value going to be at that? Because that is the variable. Because if you're saying it's 14 million, how do you know that's going to happen? Because
you're sounding like an accountant now.
No, I'm explaining to you the numbers. So you have to evaluate the risk.
But you have to take the view. You have to take the view that, you take the worst case scenario. The market's dropped 10% in my view. Is it going to drop another 10%? Probably not. It might do, but then that's the risk we take. We're entrepreneurs.
Absolutely.
But we make sure we have an out before we have an in. We make sure we know what we're going to do if it all goes wrong. I think that's super important as well.
I think you put in a nutshell. For me, I would always do a scenario modelling on anything. I would do first if I'm going to sell it as a property developer. Secondly, if that's not going to work out because something goes north, how much is the refinancing? We have to sort of project it, and how much would the cash flow offset that? Because I might have to hold it.
Yeah, you might.
And that's, it's got to be at least 2 or 3 scenarios, because, or it might be a hybrid of the two.
But what you've got to remember is at the moment we're not buying anything off anybody personally, because they're never going to sell at the money we want to pay. So we're only buying off receivers, administrators, and this convent, for instance, has to be sold.
Right. Okay.
So and no one's going to benefit personally from it.
Right.
So when people aren't benefiting it personally from it, they do care what it goes for, but they haven't got the same. It's not so important.
Of course.
So they're the only people we're buying off. If you say to me, "Oh, Mr. Bloggs wants to sell," well, he might do. He's not going to take my offer. Waste of time at the moment.
I think the numbers that you said on that deal, they do stack up.
Thank you.
Yeah, because if you think about 14 million to 9 million, and you put in as long as you put in a little bit of fudge in there for the cost, any movement.
Thank you. Gets your approval, does it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm delighted to hear it.
Absolutely.
My God, I can sleep at night now. I can sleep at night now. That's fantastic.
Listen, everyone comes and asks for advice. Of course, this is. And
normally he charges me, so it's actually free this time.
See?
So, I mean,
this is why he's savvy. This is why he's got 4 decades.
That's why I came in.
Love it. And I look forward to chatting to him about that project. I think it's going to be quite interesting. It sounds like
be interesting.
And I think the big nuggets which John's just given us in a huge amount from the experience, knowledge that he's got, is that he's thinking on some of these property developments 2 years. He's whacking a year planning, a year in development, and thinking about what it's going to be worth in 2 years. And that's the debate we just had.
Yeah, the biggest mistake people make is they'll think they'll be in and out in a year, and it just doesn't. All due respect, it doesn't happen.
And do you know what people don't realise? I know we're getting into this detail, but one of the most important things is how we structure that.
Totally right.
Because
structuring the deal is
so important, and you got to speak. I'm biased. I'm telling people. I tell everybody I'm biased, but you need your accountant, tax advisor, business advisor, because
you need your full team. I hate the word power team, by the way, because I just hate all these educators use bloody power team. I hate the word, but I use the word consultants. You need to surround yourself with the best people you can afford. It's so important.
You've put it in a nutshell. We're just doing one right now. The GDV of the deal is going to go from 4 or 5 million to about 8 or 9 million. Fantastic. That's huge on a block. So we've structured that. We saved VAT, stamp duty, land tax, capital allowances, got a whole exit. But if we hadn't done that, that would have cost them that's over £1 million. Yeah. That's a lot of savings.
Serious.
And you need your lawyer involved who understands commercial, residential, depending on what it is, really good. Understand that, and they also have to know what their remit is.
Yeah.
And also you have to have your accountant, tax advisor know their remit, and your financing, whoever they are. Make sure you invest time to get a good one, because that could break the whole deal.
Yeah.
And if you have all those people, they're key parties, and then you have other parties that come along for different parts. But if you don't have that, and you don't have those regular, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing.
No, and what I would also say is, if you're a property developer, you show me a property developer that's never lost any money, I'll show you a liar.
I love
Every developer will have the odd disaster. Something goes wrong that you don't expect, might be COVID, might be bill costs going up 30% without you realising, or whatever it might be the builder's gone bust on you, could be anything. You're going to make mistakes, but it's how you deal with those mistakes that's important. We've all lost money on deals, all of us, but it's how you deal with them and keeping it to a minimum. A friend of mine, a very successful property developer, I asked him the other day, I said, be honest, how many deals are successful? He said 70%. 70%. He said, I know I'm going to lose it. Out of 10, I know I'm not going to make money on 3. But who cares? I'm making money on the 7.
I think you put that in a nutshell. It's when you're experienced property developer, and especially when I see different ones, they mitigate that because, as you said, they have a number of projects running. Yeah. So they know that they will minimise a loss. It may break even or slight loss. But then the ones that make money, they have enough margin because they have that. Because different areas, different property strategies have different impacts. And
they do, and the market can be different. It is a micro market, so you've got one area that you think is going to be great and it's not for some reason. I mean, no one wants to lose money. You know, the first thing I think about with a deal is, I'm relieved twice.
Yeah.
Once when I get my money back that
Yeah.
I've put in,
Yeah.
and the bank's money back. The second when I make a profit. First thing is don't lose any money.
Yeah.
Second thing, make a profit. It's not a bonus, but that's how I see it.
I'm going to touch on because there's so much, and I'll be talking to John for ages. Got so much fun to get through. I think one of the things that I've noticed speaking to you is that you became an entrepreneur from a young age, but your natural, one of the skill set, which I'm sure your wife has seen, is you're a natural leader. Because when you have conversations with yourself and how you get people involved, and part of the property graduate aspects, I saw that you naturally know how to ruffle feathers when they need to be ruffled, definitely, but also get people together
on side,
and you know how to get the best out of people. How have you found that journey to develop that leadership aspect? I never, until someone mentioned it in many ways, I never realised I was. I think it's a natural, relatively natural thing. And I didn't know I had that ability. It's like I didn't know I had the ability, particularly, especially as a stammerer, to stand up and you know, I speak at different events and I have I put a certain amount of humour into it. Mind you, Property Elevator, with the rest of them on the show, I need to put the humour in because they're bloody boring, some of them, aren't they? Ranjan and that lot. So, you know, I have to put a bit of comedy into it. But just on that point, Ranjan, if you're watching,
so he's a gift that just keeps on giving. To be fair.
Let's get on.
I can go on and on. So what I'm saying is, you know, I never realised I had that ability. To be fair, and but it's a natural thing. It's not trained. It's not, you know, it's just it's an actual thing. But what I would say is, when I bought into Cambridge United when I was 26 years old,
nicely onto that.
Yeah, the managers, the football managers, we must have sacked 7 or 8 of them over the years, and all the rest of it. Commercial managers, football managers. I was there 18 years.
Wow.
And then eventually we struggled. We went from the 4th division nearly to the 1st. We got into the playoffs of the Premiership and on gates of 5,000. Amazing. We had an amazing run. 2 quarter-final FA Cups. Amazing time.
Wow.
And 4 of us really owned the club between us.
Was you there when Dion Dublin was
there? I sold Dion Dublin.
To Man U, my team.
Right, well, Dion, what happened was, we were out in Sweden and I was with the team in Sweden. I was doing a little pre-season training because I was young enough then to do it.
Wow.
And in fact, Dion said to me, I was at the back, running at the back, and Dion was at the back with me. I mean, you know, the guy's an athlete. He's at the back with me in pre-season training. And I said to him, and he said, John, slow down. That was Dion. Anyway, next day, got a call from Man United, and they were in Germany. And so he went from Sweden to Germany for the medical. We agreed the deal at £1 million at the time, and and the deal was done. So he never came back. He went off with them.
Wow!
And then he broke his leg soon into.
I heard, But
bizarrely, of course, it's come full circle in a way because he's now on what's the show he does? The auction show.
Wow.
BBC One, Homes Under the Hammer.
Wow.
So it's he's a nice man, Dion.
He's been on like Match of the all these.
Yeah, he's done really. Dion's done really well in the media, really well. And then so I was there 18 years. We got into financial trouble. I bought the ground, which caused a lot of problems. I had a lot of people shouting at games at me. I had a special police to look after me at games. It was embarrassing. And then on a Sunday, 2 coach loads of fans were intercepted by the police on the way down to my house to protest.
Wow.
So they intercepted them, and anyway, we leased it back to the club for 5 years, and then we sold it on to Grosvenor Estates, who thought they could, a subsidiary of Grosvenor Estates, massive company, who thought they could relocate them, but they never had bud. And actually, since then, the club have managed to buy the ground back.
Wow.
So anyway, that's my footballing life really.
In moving on to that's really great insight. People are going to love that because that brings the reality of what John's achieved in his career to date, and he's
lost
done
a lot of
so
games.
much. A lot of games, but you've had the ups as well.
Yeah.
You know, so you have to balance it, right? I think one of the things that I want to just touch is, in your career, where did you or so far, because there's still a long way to go, where have you made the most amount of money? Because the entrepreneurs watching and want to be inspired.
Well, this might not inspire them, to be fair, but I made more money from the age of 20 to 30.
Why?
Than I have since, really.
Why?
Pro rata. It was good times. There wasn't too much competition. I had a great backer, and I had a great backer in Mr. Boyce, as he was called.
And it's not from Only Fools and Horses.
No, it's not. Definitely not. And definitely not. And his son now, I do some stuff with his son still now, as well as some stuff on my own and so on. And we got into buying tower blocks.
Wow.
So we bought a tower block in Ipswich, which was 74 flats, sold them all off. And in 1996, we made 988,000 profit.
Wow.
After interest.
Wow.
And I was 12, I was 25 or something.
Wow.
And from there, we then went on and bought a number of tower blocks across the country. And in those days, these councils were blowing them up. And to blow them up was £500,000. So if we gave them 100,000 for it, they're delighted. They're 600,000 better off. And then we refurbish them and sell them to first-time buyers. And my view was, if you can make them as much like a hotel foyer as possible, and we used to put gyms in, now it's naff, isn't it? But in those days, it was quite something to put a gym in, little gym in, and all the rest of it, saunas in, and we sold them off to first-time buyers. So we had blocks of 15, 20, 21, 20 odd stories.
You'd be surprised. I've seen some developers putting modern day gyms in now. So
yeah, but they're not like the rubbish gyms we put in those days. We're talking about late 80s, early 90s. Then the recession came in the early 90s. And I had a big country house with 100 acres and all the rest of it.
Wow.
And I thought, this is going to be tough. So I sold that and I bought the house I'm in now, which is another hall with 22 acres, but it was cheaper than the one I had.
Wow.
And I've lived there for 31 years.
Wow.
So I think anticipating problems before they happen is really important.
I think this brings us nicely on success in surviving in business for decades. I think you put it in a nutshell without even asking the question. What you stated is, you know what's coming because you can feel it from your experience, knowledge, and you know how to adapt. Yeah. And you have to constantly keep on doing that.
I think you have to keep adapting, and you have to have all these strategies. These educators roll out these strategies. Normally one, because that's all they know about, to be honest with you. And they've probably done it once, and then they want to teach everyone else how to do it. I think you have to be flexible. I think being a one-trick pony. We have some. In the mid-90s, we were doing buying a lot of offices to convert back into residential. We listed buildings, did a lot of listed buildings, historical buildings, and converted them back into houses and flats. And then everyone started catching on. So then we moved on to something different, and then moved on to something different, and so on. So you need to be ahead of the game a little bit. PD was a great example. Nicholas Warwork, who's on Property Elevator with me, a great friend of mine. Nicholas was into PD in 2012, and he made a lot of money, you won't mind me saying it, on micro units. Yeah. And then the government have changed it, and now you can't do micro, and everyone wants to do PD. He doesn't do it anymore. He's moved on. So you have to be flexible. And I've done. It's interesting. I do quite a lot of commercial that people perhaps don't realise, because I do a lot of residential mainly, but I do quite a lot of commercial. Got commercial investments. And we worked out the other day that I've converted 16 different types of buildings into residential. Wow. From piggeries to water tower to this, that, the other, in 84 different towns and cities across the UK. So that gives you the breadth of experience. But there's nothing I haven't really tried. I wouldn't say I've done well, but tried. And that's there's not much I haven't said we haven't bought, if you like, over those years.
I think you're giving huge value to the audience of insight, the different property strategies, the mindset, the geographical diversity, huge. I think this leads us on nicely. I think you sort of touched on it, but one of the biggest things I've noticed when I speak to yourself is you built a huge reputation. And people always say they built a reputation, and I'm not one of these people that always agrees with them, because you have to have some substance when you build a reputation. You have to have a track record and a way of speaking and getting people on side. So how have you done this, And I want to cover key parts of building a reputation. One of the things you're known is, as I mentioned, tough but fair. How do you get that balance?
Well, I think first of all, you've got to be authentic. I think the people now, and I do some social media, as you know, and I've learned how to, my stepdaughter does most of it, as you know, but anyway, I've sort of learned that that's not a bad way of communicating with people. I don't think it's the be and end all, by the way. I mean, I got 3.2 million views on a TikTok thing I said.
And you said it right today.
Said it last year, yeah, I said it right today. Well, TikTok or TikTok or whatever. So, and out of that, 14,000 comments, which sounds great, but actually, did I make any money out of it? No. So, you know, it's a lot of it is fluff. So, but what I would say is, if you're looking to build, I think you have to. I never thought of myself as building a reputation. I've just done what I do, and people like it or they don't like it. They like the forthrightness, I think, of what I say and the honesty in it. But and then people say, well, it's all right for you. You can afford to be honest about it. Or, well, I can afford to be honest about it, touch wood. But you should always be honest about it. So if you've got people telling you things that aren't true, because they want to get you on the course or something, then you know, I get people. I do a few seminars, not that many, and I get people, and I always try and speak to them beforehand on a Zoom or something, just chat to them. And I might say, look, I don't think this is for you. Yeah, and they go, well, then they want to come even more if you say that to them, by the way. So, well, I'm not being rude, but I just don't think it will benefit you. Or when they're on, you know, one or two seminars, I always, you know, I want to be a developer. So, well, I don't think you're suited to it. You know, they don't like that either. But I mean, I just think being honest about it is the best policy. And I think being authentic is the way forward.
I think that's a rare quality in the modern day. I agree with you 110%. But in the modern day where people have so many pressures, they sometimes forget themselves and they make not the best decisions. And I think if you are authentic with people, in the longer term, people will respect you. And yes, you may lose some relationship, but they weren't worth having.
No.
So I think that's the hardest part. And it has to have that self-belief. It goes back to self-belief, I believe. I think one of the other bits that when I speak to you is huge is your networking. I've seen this person, John Howard, networking in person. I think you went to an event that we invited you to. And you've got that down to a T.
Thank you.
And
I'm not. It's just I've been trained. It's just what I think the thing is to do. You know.
I think this is the insight, the audience, because people find these all challenges.
Yeah.
You know, to be tough but fair. And people say that, but you've given a real life examples of how you've done that. Hi everyone, sorry to interrupt the podcast. Hope you're getting a huge amount of value from this. Just going to be quick, 2 seconds. First of all, to let you know, in the comments below, we have got links to free business guides that can help you on your entrepreneur journey. They include exclusive footage from Sky TV episodes that I've done and a whole load of other content in there. Whether you're a growing business, property investor, property developer, or if you want to love the fun of SaaS pensions. Please do look at those. And if you still want more help, get in touch. The contact details are below. I hope you enjoy the podcast. How have you learned to really, you know, network and actually get the experience and get that your view and your opinions across to everybody and build those relationships when you've got a whole new set of people, and you just do it without even thinking about it?
Well, most of them don't know who I am, which helps when I start.
I find that hard to believe.
And the story I always tell is I always sit in the audience beforehand and talk to someone. They go, oh, who's on tonight? Who's talking tonight? They go, I don't know, some bloke. What do you want to talk about? Well, I like to know about this. What's your name? You know, Margaret. Would you mind if I mention you, Margaret, when I'm speaking later? But it breaks the ice, you know, and I think having a bit of humour breaks the ice. And, you know, Margaret said to me earlier, you know, that's just I just find that natural to do that. And I know it sounds really, really simple, but smiling is so important. And I know it sounds a bit crackers. I always say to my stepchildren, 2 girls, you know, they look, when they used to be little, look a bit miserable sometimes, I say, make sure you bloody smile. It doesn't do anything. It costs you nothing to smile. Make sure you say hello to everyone. Treat everybody the same, whether it's the gardener, Harry, on the way out to school, or it's someone we know or whoever. Everyone gets treated the same. Everyone gets treated the same. And I think that is so important, that to make people feel important when you speak to them and give them respect is the least you can do, especially if they've invited you to an event and they expect you to meet people and talk to you. You know, I go to some events and the other speakers don't even engage with anyone. I mean, you always do, but I mean, so many don't engage. And I like to go around, speak to everyone. If there's tables there, I go around to each table, introduce myself, sit down with them. You know, I just think that's part of the job. That's what you're there for. Boris Johnson came to a dinner.
Do you know, you've read my mind? Right. He's actually read my mind, because I was just going to give an example. Don't worry.
Boris Johnson came to a dinner, and he also stayed on for in the evening. And in the evening dinner, we had 2 dinners. The evening dinner, I was the auctioneer for them, and I was sat next to him at the dinner at the lunchtime, and he went round every table, shook everyone's hands. 280 people in the room. He shook everyone's hands, tried to speak to as many people as possible. We have a lot of politicians come and see us because we've got this little big business club they come down for and so on. And he's the only one who did that. So love him or hate him, he's a communicator.
Apart from me soaking myself, right, I think that's a great point. How he's done that is, it doesn't matter what level he was at. He's treated everybody.
Absolutely,
it's
the same.
Personalisation, isn't it? Being personable.
Yeah.
If you're not personable with people, this is what's going to happen.
And that's how you get deals. People say to me, "Oh, well, it's all right for you. You get deals." Yeah, I talk to people. I get a relationship with them, and they trust me, and I pay them a fee as well for finding it and all the rest of it. You know, if you spend all your time doing emails, you ain't going to talk to no one. You're not making any contacts. Get out there and speak to a few people.
I think you've actually smashed that question and answer. That is exactly huge value, and that's huge insight to everybody who's watching. Moving on to some of the successes, other successes that you've had. You did a huge, and I was quite fortunate to hear you do a presentation on this. One of your big developments was the wine rack.
Yes.
£26 million build cost.
Yeah.
GDV.
It was meant to be 22 million, but then Brexit came.
And we'll get on to Brexit in a bit.
Yeah. Shall I tell you why it went from 22 to 26?
Yeah, go on.
Because the pound against the euro.
Wow.
So 70% of building materials come from Europe.
Wow.
So when the market, when the exchange rate changes by 20%, that's where the difference is.
So that cost you 4 mil.
Yeah.
But you still made 38 million.
Well, we didn't make 38 million. The GDV was 38 million.
Yeah.
I never talk about what we make. I never talk about what we lose, because at the end of the day, and I don't stand next to a Ferrari and tell them that's my car. I haven't got a Ferrari, before you ask, by the way. So, although in my 20s,
Lamborghinis are better to
in my
stand next
20s, I had a Bentley with a chauffeur, but I was a bit of a prat then. So that's what I mean about making more money in the 20s. So. Yeah, that deal came about because the block, it was a skeleton, and it was called the wine rack because it was a concrete frame and never been filled in, if you can imagine that. And it went bust in 2007. We bought it in 2017, 18. We paid £1 million for it.
Wow.
Okay, off the receivers.
Yeah.
It cost them 7 million to build what they had built so far in 2007.
Wow.
So some of these difficult deals only have a window in a 15-year cycle of property cycle before it starts going wrong again.
Yeah.
They only have probably a 5-year gap where a difficult project will actually work because of the costs.
Yes.
And we got it about right. We were a bit slow getting started. We borrowed the money off Homes England, which is the government bank.
Yeah.
And we only borrowed the money off it because of the MP at the time, who Ben Gummer, who I got friendly with, and I'm a Tory donor anyway, which helps. I accept that. But that deal was agreed at Treasury level. Wow. It was the biggest private loan. It was the biggest loan to a private property company. So they've done bigger ones since.
Wow.
It's all been paid back. We sold the last one the other day, so it took 5 years. to building it. We built it on time, on budget, which is very rare, by the way, for us or anyone else. The reason we did that was because the bigger the contractors, normally, the more organised they are.
Yes.
And the more consultants. Our consultants' bill was 840,000 consultants.
But worth every penny.
But worth every penny. So, you know, you got, it's easier doing a deal that size than a small deal. I've recently bought a block of flats in Birmingham, sold them off the same day to someone else, chopped off the back garden, kept the garage. Now, I've had more fun doing that deal, where I hope to get planning on the garage, by the way, for a house. I may not, I may look a fool. I actually got just as much fun out of that deal than I have doing these big deals. So I'm unusual amongst developers because a lot of my people I know and the level of deals I can do wouldn't ever touch anything small.
Wow.
Whereas I'll touch anything. You know, if it's a deal in it, I'll try and do it. And again, the person I sold that to has got a great deal. I've got the contacts. I got it at the right money. In fact, they came on one of my mentorships years ago,
wow.
And I kept really friendly with him. And that's just contacts, just how it works out, isn't it?
I think you've put insight on the mindset, how you go about constructing these deals and what relationships you have to build to do those. I think the other bit, because time is always against us, is your TV career and the books that you've done. Huge amount that you've done.
Well,
so give us a bit.
I fell into that in the last few years. So
has it had a huge impact?
Yeah, it's been great fun. Yeah. Great fun. I mean, and I
don't the TV or the books or
books. I don't take it seriously. That's the first thing. I do not take it seriously. There's not a lot of money in it. And I don't take it seriously, but I've really enjoyed the people I've met. I've met you through that.
Yeah,
I've met Ranjan, I've met Nicholas, I've met Paul Mahoney, I've met so many nice people through it all, as well as lots of people who are very complimentary, which is nice. So I wrote a book, which I found very easy to do. I was surprised how easy it was to do. And my English teacher at school would have had his head in his hands. But I actually found it very easy to write. And it actually is very easy to read. Yeah. Because, as my brother says, the longest word in it is "and," which is a bit rude. But it's very self-explanatory about the property developing and investing for newcomers. And then I did another one, Advance. I've done an auction one because we didn't touch on the fact that I owned Auction House UK. 40-year-old franchises across the UK for a while. Sold the business a while ago with my partner. And then I've done a advanced property developing book and auction book, and now I'm just finishing a commercial book. Wow. So I found them really good fun to do. I found them easy to do because if you talk, anybody can write a book. Yeah. You just write about what you know about. Yeah, it's not that difficult. Getting them published is a pain, but anyway, and all the rest of it. And then because I did the book, I then fell into property TV. With Property TV rang me up and said, "Look, you got a book? Would you like to come in and do some stuff?" So I came in and did that. That's where I've met most of the people I've met is through Property TV. Wow. And then I've done some. I've had that. I've been talking with the BBC about a series and bits and bobs. Hasn't come to anything yet, but who knows? So and I found it quite easy to be in front of the camera. I don't have a problem with it at all. It doesn't worry me. I don't care what the questions are going to be. I just, I don't, honestly, I find it quite easy, which again, surprised myself. But I found it I really enjoy it. I found it good fun. And anything, to be honest with you, it's given me a new lease of life. And what I love doing, I love meeting people. I like helping people. And that's when I came up with the idea of the Property Graduate.
That leads us nicely onto the Property Graduate, because what you've done is you've leveraged TV. You're quite easy because you're going on there. You know how to make an impact. You've got a huge amount of knowledge and experience. Yep. I think a lot of people struggle with that because they haven't got the knowledge and experience.
I agree.
And they can't then relate, because when you're on TV, as you know, 30 seconds is like half hour. Yeah. And it goes like that.
It does.
And if you're trying to blag it, you get found out very quickly.
Very, very quickly. I've had, without being arrogant, I've had to step in and help one or two out over the years. Because they get, especially something like Property TV, where you don't get a second take, really.
No, you don't.
Which is great training, by the way. Oh, come on, we're doing it. Bang, we're doing it. Come on, really? That's it. Yeah, we're doing it. So you don't get a second take, and unless it's a real mess.
Yeah.
Because they haven't got time, they're on to the next thing.
Yeah.
But it's really good training, and I get put on with a lot of people who are doing it for the first time, and I love that. I don't mind that, because I'm happy to help them out. If they need some, don't need any help, but they tend to put me on with people who haven't been on before or not very often, which I'm delighted to do, because sometimes they just need that little bit of help.
Absolutely.
When you're on there.
I to be honest, I've had that a few times as
Yeah,
well.
exactly.
And when you first start, I was with someone quite relatively new, but I just found it quite normal, natural.
But you're very natural at it as well. And when we've been on telly, we've been on it together, and it's good fun. There's lots of banter. I don't always agree with you. You don't agree with me all the time, but that's fun. You get some people and they just say yes, that's right. You need that bit of banter. You need that little bit, and that's why they asked me back, because. I'm sure because it's a bit of life, put a bit of life in it.
Huge value, and opinions make it. And I think it needs nicely onto the property graduate. The reason why you did property graduate.
So the reason I did property graduate, I thought, well, what shall we did a property elevator as well, which is it's in its 6th series. I mean, that's amazing.
I always have a joke around, John. Second-rate show after property graduate.
Exactly. So what the idea of property graduate was. There's lots of people out there trying to be property developers, and they're struggling. They find it difficult to do, and all the rest of it. So I came up with the idea of a little bit like The Apprentice, but the winner gets £1 million worth of funding from me to go and find a deal, and we share the profit 50-50. So I'm not that generous, because I'm sharing it 50-50. So they have to go and find it. They've got 1 year to find it. The winner has. They have to go and find a deal. I mentor them through the whole process, obviously. I take the risk with the deal, and we share the profit 50-50, and up to £1 million worth of funding. So that's buying it and developing it. And Alfie Crofty won the first year. We're doing a deal in Hungerford at the moment.
Wow.
It's taken a bit longer than a year, to be fair, but we won't worry too much about that. And he's a very bright boy. He actually came and worked with me as well, which
Fantastic.
That isn't the job, that isn't the prize.
Yeah.
And I think it's very important people keep their jobs as well. I'm not suggesting give your job up for it by any means, but we have a few hundred people apply every year.
Yeah.
We whittled it down to 20 also, and then we have 3 rounds. The first round is an interview, which they get it from 20 to 10. Yeah. The 10 then, the second day, the ones left have to go away. Well, we give them a challenge, which normally is a property that I wanted to buy or I have bought, and they have to work out what they would do with it to make a 30% net profit.
Wow.
That is carnage, which I cannot understand, because I can analyse the deal. I can analyse the deal within 5 minutes. They can't do it within an hour. And it's crazy in my view.
Just to add into how John analyses the deal is quite unique, just to let you know, all right? Because everyone's got different perspectives how to analyse a deal.
Can I just say how simple it is? Once you know the square footage, you can work out the GDV, and you work out the bill cost. So that way you can work out what you can pay for it. It's not rocket science. It's not that difficult.
I think that's the top line numbers.
Yeah.
But when you're
that's all we're looking for. That's all we're looking for.
But you're also looking at all the implications on the cost side, the contingency,
interest,
and all this.
Yes, but that's
tax,
not. But that's we don't worry about the tax. The tax because the tax is paid. If you make a profit, you pay your tax. That's we're not worried about tax. What I'm worried about is whether having worked it out within 5-10 minutes, you want to then look it into more detail or not, or whether you want to chuck it in the bin. This lot some of them would take a day to do it. Well, you can't do that. You take a day, 30 days, you've only looked at 30 deals.
I think what you've done is put it in stages. The first is the rough and ready look.
But it's a simple appraisal based on simple information that you get off the particulars.
And
you don't need to go into how many schools there are in there, what the crime rates are. We don't need to know that to start with. What we need to know is what you can afford to pay for it. And you can, once you have the square footage, everything else you can work out straight away. It's simple. If I can do it, any idiot can do it, I'm telling you.
This is why Property Graduate is going to be explosive, because you're going to see these difference in matters and minds on different affairs regarding how you buy a property and all the different opinions, because every entrepreneur has a different way of doing it.
They shouldn't do. in my view.
I think there's different stages, because you mentioned tax in the sense it's only on profit, but
we don't need to worry about tax.
Just
Tax
on
is,
there, you got
tax is irrelevant. That's why you got accountants. That's why you got experts like you.
absolutely.
You sort the tax out. I'm not worried about the tax. I'm not worried about the tax.
Of course, but one of the things is when people are doing the numbers, when they get into stage 2, stage 1, rough and ready. I agree.
Stage 2, don't need to worry about the tax
when you've got
either.
stamp duty, land tax, and VAT.
Of course, that's in stage 1. You know what the stamp duty is.
You've got to have a rough idea.
You need to know what the stamp duty is in stage 1, but you don't need to worry about what your income tax is or how much tax you're going to pay at the end.
No, that's different.
You don't need to know that.
But what I found was a challenge was because that varies the numbers quite a lot depending on what type
stamp
of,
duty?
Yeah.
How hard is that to work that out? Come on.
Well, it depends.
Go on the government website, it tells you everything, what you can do, what you can get away with stamp duty, what you can't. It isn't rocket science. Property is a very simple business. It's complicated by these so-called educators. It's a simple business. If it wasn't a simple business, I would not be in it.
I think at certain levels it's simple, but if you are taking it to quite advanced aspects, it depends on what strategy you're doing, I think. Because I think if you're buying, say, commercial property, let's use an example, and I love this discussion, the audience is going to love this. If you're buying commercial property, you can save shed loads on stamp duty when you buy it. The VAT can save because that affects the stamp duty. Then you've got to make sure, whether you're a developer or investor, whether you're going to claim something called capital allowances, because if you're a developer you can't claim them, investors can. So this is where having the right team,
that makes some difference.
Huge difference.
It makes some difference. But at the end of the day, most of those things are pretty basic, and your accountant would advise you. You would advise your clients accordingly. And that's where you want a good team. You want the right accountants in place. I accept that. But at the end of the day...
It's a specialist area. It's not bog standard accountants.
No, I understand it's not. But if you know anything about yourself, you should be able to sharpen up and know how to do it. You should have a specialist in your team who can do it. That's all I'm saying. I don't, do I know how to, most of the stuff we're property developing, I don't know how to do, but I know people who will, and I'm the captain of the ship.
And that goes back to leadership, which we mentioned earlier. Yeah. I think that's one of the things that you have to be really good, because you can't do everything. No, it's impossible.
And the people who try to do everything get into all sorts of trouble. They're control freaks. I'm not a control freak.
That's a huge delegation.
I'm a delegator. I'm very happy for everyone else, and hopefully they're brighter and better than me, by the way. I'm happy. I'm delighted if they're better than me. The difference is they haven't got the balls I've got. That's the difference.
You heard that on the show.
That is the difference. They worry about crossing the road. That's why they're consultants. They're bright people. They don't need to take risks. I've had to take some calculated risks. Now, de-risking is what it's all about, by the way. I wouldn't go to a casino.
Yeah, of course.
I wouldn't put a bet on a horse, although I did train racehorses at home, but we haven't mentioned that. But what I'm saying is, de-risking deals before you do them is the key. And that is the key.
I think
you need to know what fear is. You need to have fear.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't have fear, I find. They shut their eyes and they go for it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
You've got to be able to mitigate your risk, but not discourage you from doing the deal if it stacks up.
No, if it stacks up, but you can't convince yourself it stacks up when it doesn't.
Yeah. I agree with you on that. I think that it leads us nicely onto obviously Certax, heavily involved in Property Graduate.
Yeah, we're delighted to have you as a sponsor. You know that you've been brilliant. So thank
you so much. And it's going to go live in October. Yeah. We're going to have that in the details below on across all social medias, and you're going to see that.
It'll be great fun, and you're in it.
I've
even brought you in.
We've got to keep that. That's going to be part of the clips coming in.
So on the show, I have two advisors basically who advise me what I should be doing. And this year we had two great ladies.
Perfect. I've got behind the scenes with them. Love it.
They're great and very experienced as well. And so that works really well.
Yeah. I think the way you've done it, and having knowledgeable property entrepreneurs or
really
living
important.
in it. Yeah. Absolutely. And then they can advise and nurture, and hopefully the winner, which will be in October, you'll be seeing huge value. Huge value.
Yeah, and what an opportunity! What an opportunity!
Huge opportunity for the person, and I think they're going to be a difference maker.
And the whole thank you. And the whole idea is that we don't just do one deal together; they become my partner, and we leave the money in the company.
Yeah.
That you're going to form in this case. For us. We leave the money in the company, and we do deal after deal after deal. And that's what used to happen years ago. Is that you'd have a property company, and you'd leave most of the money in for the next deal, and you build the company up. And that's what I want to do with the property entrepreneurs who want to get on in life.
I think there's a way to do it really tax efficiently. I just explained to the audience. So what you do is you set up with the parent companies, the subsidiary, and then you move the money up. We'll be doing
that's your department.
We'll be doing that fund, saving you quite a lot of tax. They love entrepreneurs.
That's why you're my accountant, so don't worry about
that. I think it leads us on to, I think you've mentioned quite a lot, but your approach. Right, because we've had huge value from John. So much stuff. When you go and watch this podcast, you're going to feel appreciation of all that value. I think you put in a nutshell your approach. I think one of the things that will come to the audience is he loves humour and he can ease the situation. You can expand a little bit on that. Well, why is that your way of communicating?
I just found over the years. That you want to do business with a smile on your face, really. And if you can't do it with a smile on your face, and see some humour in it, and I don't mean being silly about it, but I mean just being friendly and kind and decent with people and engaging with them, then if you can't do that, then what's the point, really? There's no point. And over the years, listen, I'm not the best property developer in the world. I'm not the worst, but I'm not the best. There's people far more successful than me. I've done okay. Maybe I've been a little bit more serious. I've done a bit better. I don't know, but I just think that in most cases it eases the situation a little bit. And we're not talking about cracking jokes exactly, but just having a nice way about you, smiling, being relaxed, not being aggressive when you talk to people. And that's frustrating at times because perhaps now and again you want to be. And I've very rarely fallen out of anyone. And if I've ever fallen out of anyone, I've always regretted it within a few days. And it's very rare that I've fallen out of anyone. I'd rather just walk away.
I think that's a great mindset.
Just walk away.
Yeah, I think that's a great mindset. I think you have to have that mindset. I think a lot of people, we are in a serious business, but there's a way of conducting yourself. Yeah. And having that relationship where people feel relaxed. And when you are with a smile, you're relaxed. Yeah. They go together.
Yeah, they do. They do go together. And it's a bit like someone telling jokes. You can't tell jokes. I can't tell jokes. I'd forget the ending, so I don't tell you. So if you can't be like that, if you haven't got that little bit of charm that's required, don't try. Because if you try, I've got a friend of mine who thinks he's charming and he's not, and he's just bloody rude to people. So if you can, I can be rude to you, Zee, and you'll smile and we'll have a laugh about it, and vice versa. But not everyone can do that, and if you can't do it, don't do it. It's like I can't tell jokes, so I don't tell jokes. There's nothing worse, is there?
I think you put the nutshell. I think it leads on doing is when you build rapport with someone.
Rapport is the key.
It's what kind of banter is going to work with them. And it's instead of jumping in with whatever you're going to jump in with, it's understanding what is that person, how do they react to stuff. And you work your way with someone. You don't start with the most controversial thing on the planet, and I think that's where people make the mistake. I think
you need to get a connection with people.
And then they know that you're.
They say when you meet someone, you have what? Is it 10 seconds to
about
impress
3 now.
3,
4. It's like
it's and that stays with them for like 2 or 3 months. So you really do need to for life even. So you really do need to make a good impression.
I think that people always say first impressions count. That's right.
I think they do.
I think most times the first impression you have people is actually the right one.
Yeah.
I've gone against that sometimes and ended up thinking, why did I do that?
Yeah.
Because naturally when someone's how they like and how they react. I always say when you're looking at someone because they can't see their own face, the reactions don't lie, do they?
No.
They don't, do they? Because you can see it. They've not got a mirror around with them wherever they go. I think that's huge value to the audience. This is how you grow your network, how you build relationships. John's put all of that in a nutshell. Now the fun part, and we're slightly going a bit over time on this podcast, but John's got huge value, so I just had to let him speak. Love hearing him, all right? And the big impact, we're going to have some debates now. You're going to see it. Bit sparks are going to fly. Impact of Brexit. John, I know you're a big fan of Brexit.
I was a big.
Can you believe it?
I was a big supporter of Brexit, and
tell us what was the reason
why is this. I asked to get the answer. You need to ask the question with everything.
Of course.
If you've got 3 deals to choose, you only afford to buy one.
Yeah.
Ask the question: what's the easiest deal to do? What's the most profitable? It's not difficult.
Yeah.
The question I asked myself: if we weren't in Europe now,
Yeah.
this is back in 2016 or whatever, would we join? And if you ask that, I spoke at a breakfast meeting in Dover Street, Mayfair, and when I was the chairman of the local Conservatives in Ipswich at the time, and they said, "Oh, don't talk about property, talk about Brexit." I thought, "Oh Christ, really?" And there were 75 people there, all London people, never been out of London, you know the type. And they thought that England stopped on the this side of the M25, and literally they booed me to start with. It was good fun, but it was just banter. But they literally booed me. And at the end of my talk, about 40 minutes I gave them. At the end of it, I said, "Right, hands up now. If we weren't in Europe, who would join now?" And very few people put their hand up, and that says it all. If you're in a club, you don't want to be in, and at the end of the day, I just felt we want to be in control of our own country. Why wouldn't we? We're different to the rest of Europe because we're an island for a start. I just felt we want to be in control of our country. Now that comes with problems. I accept that, in as much that because they worried about everyone else coming out, they made a example of us, if you like. But over time, that will dilute, because it doesn't do them any good either.
Of course.
Keeping us 180 days in Spain, that doesn't do us any good. Doesn't do them any good, because who owns more property abroad in Europe than people in the UK? No one. We're the biggest homeowners in Spain, the biggest homeowners in France, and I think second biggest in Italy.
We're going to be up there.
And no one bothers about. No one wants to live in Germany anyway. So at the end of the day, or Belgium. So at the end of the day, they shoot themselves in the foot. Portugal's
going to be big as well.
We're the biggest in Portugal.
I definitely.
We're the biggest in Portugal. 10-year tax breaks and all sorts. You can go on about that forever, I know. So what I'm saying is that's why I was passionate about having control. And there's good things about it and there's bad things about it. What we haven't done is taken advantage of them all, and that's partly because of COVID, partly because this government has had all sorts of problems, and that's a shame. It's a real shame, because we could lower, and this is your department, not mine. Ireland, 12.5% capital gains or 13% capital gains or whatever it is. We're going to be 25%. It's madness. We can do what we want within reason.
The capital gains tax right now for property is
crazy.
18 and 28, and it's 10 and 20 if it's
there you
property.
Go.
And this is the problem.
It's crazy, absolutely crazy.
And corporation tax in Ireland is much lower than us.
Much lower.
And
that's why
we've gone the other way.
65 billion surplus.
And what I've noticed with Jeremy was he's changed his position, the Chancellor, on this, because previously he was like, drop it low. I think there is opportunities. I'm not a fan of Brexit.
Really?
Yeah, I haven't been.
You never said that before.
Ed, I always say it, I'll be honest. The reason why I haven't been is I think the pressure initially has affected our economy, and that's undisputable.
Hang on a minute.
It has
since COVID, we have come back from COVID financially. Now they're saying better than Germany, France, Italy, and Spain.
I think you mentioned earlier, our costs have rapidly increased. Yes?
Our
costs have increased.
How do you mean our costs?
Our cost of where we're getting our
materials.
But
that's because we need to do a lot more.
But they're coming from Europe.
Yeah, but we need to manufacture more in this country.
I understand
that's the whole point of being out of Europe, is that we should be doing much more ourselves.
I agree with that, but I'm saying to you that this is the...
Yeah, it's the rub of it. Yeah.
So there's these costs that are going to impact, and I think they've hurt our economy quite a bit initially.
Yeah.
Is it going to be better in 5-10 years' time?
Yes.
I think that's a different question.
Good.
My question
is... So you're on my side after all that?
No, I'm not. I'm saying 0 to 5 years, it's affected a lot.
Yeah,
no one knows the answer.
Of course it will, because like anything, it's been a big change, and
it's been
this
huge
government
change.
hasn't really got to grips with it.
I agree with that, and I think this is really useful to understand. I think costs and supply side has affected us
Yes.
quite a lot, because I go into Tesco's and places like that, and I struggle to buy eggs. That was not a problem pre-Brexit.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, you need free range fed from up the farm. That's what you need to do.
Organic. I love it.
But can I just say this?
Yeah, please.
The queues they were talking about from Dover, the big queue, there's going to be queues right up the M20 and all this. Hasn't happened. It hasn't happened.
I think there's been odd incidents, but not the level.
Only when the French president made an example of us over one Christmas.
Yeah.
Apart, it hasn't happened. All the doomsayers, everyone's going to leave the city of London. Everyone's going to leave. Google have just built the biggest office space in London going. Because they know what a fantastic country we are.
There's no dispute that the UK is a fantastic country, and I'm a huge UK fan because I've been born and bred here and all our lives. But I think one of the issues that we have as London has been affected because I've got financial services and background. We've had
it's not doing too bad, is it?
It's been affected because some people making their decisions, especially the financial service, which is huge for our country, whether we agree or not. We're financial capital of the world. That's in New York, right?
Yeah.
People have now moved to Ireland and Spain and other places. I was working for a Spanish bank, Santander at the time, and one of the biggest issues was how are they going to do that, because Europe has different set of rules than us, and this is the fallout a bit, where it's affected some of our high talent that's not retained in UK because of this, because they can go. So there has been impacts, and I think we've got to be balanced. I'm not saying Brexit's all bad. What I'm saying is there's a lot of issues with Brexit.
I think once it settles down, and I think it needs 5 to 10 years to settle down. I think people will realise what a good decision it was.
But that 5-10 years we are losing a lot of money.
Well, you say that.
We lost 100 billion of our thing.
Those
numbers are
you say all that.
OBR have come
you
out
say all
with
that, but it turns out we've done they rejigged they looked at the figures and realised they made a mistake, and we've done better than Germany, France, Spain and Italy in terms of recovery from COVID. So I mean, we're not doing too bad.
I think COVID.
Everybody wants us. Not everyone. A lot of people in this country, all they want to do is slag the country off, and it's crazy. We are self-harmers. We really are self-harmers. You don't get other countries. It's like the COVID thing. It was dreadful. But we said that anyone who died with COVID had died of COVID.
Yeah.
Other countries didn't say that. They said, well, they died of whatever it was. They had COVID, but they were going to die of cancer or whatever. We didn't say that.
Yeah.
So our figures were loads more. I mean, we are bonkers. We make everything out to be the worst it could be. Other countries don't bother. And by the way, other countries half the European rules weren't even taken on by Spain. It's ignored them. So how can that be right?
I think there's a difference between COVID, and I agree with a lot of stuff about COVID, and I also agree with you on sometimes we don't give ourselves that balanced opinion where we're doing well, we don't embrace that bit.
You've only got to look at the news. All the news channels, most of them are just, I know people who don't watch the news much anymore because they're just sick of it.
I limitedly watch it, and
that's a shame. It shouldn't be like that.
But it's fake news, a lot of it.
I'm not saying it's fake, but it's biased news.
Yeah, but
depends what the editor of the show wants to put out.
But I think there is a difference. I think on what you've mentioned, I think Brexit, there is certain implications. From,
what I would say, Zee,
as a property person, put your political views to one side. As a property entrepreneur,
you're the brains of this partnership today. You're the brains.
You're humbling me too much now.
You're the brains. So if you think Brexit's affected us, I can't argue with that. It has affected, I'm sure, economically. But I think in time that will turn around. That's my view.
I think what one of the situations is now, or the situation is, irrespective of whether it's been positive or negative, it's there now. So
let's hope then no one tries to turn it around.
I think we've got to look at the situation and try to do the best for our country. I think that's where I agree with you on. Good. And I think ultimately, for us, we have to look at the positive light.
So you agree with Brexit after all?
I don't agree with Brexit. I agree that we're in a situation and there's impacts to it, is how do we mitigate it and make the best for the country? I think that's a different conversation.
The difference is, there's no difference. We both want the best for the country.
Of course.
And at the end of the day, that's the most important thing.
And
that means Labour not getting in. but I'm afraid I think they will.
I've got on that one. Last question,
Yes.
and we're finishing. This has been a huge value. Thank you, John, so far. And the last bit is, we had a little debate. Do you believe there's a recession currently or not? I know forget the numbers. I know I'm a numbers person because they're being manipulated. What you feel when you're looking around the economy, because property is one of the indicators, isn't
yes,
it?
it is a big indicator, yeah.
Do you feel that we're in
we're in tricky times, of course we are. I don't think, my gut feeling is that this time next year things will look a lot different. Well, there'll be an election any minute. I'll be canvassing on doors. I think I'll be wasting my time, mind you, but there we go. So, but what I would say is that the interest rates we have now, I think, are 5% or whatever, 5.5%, 5.25%, are probably not far off what they should be anyway. Maybe 4% is about right. The fact we were at zero for so long was crackers.
Yeah.
And the Bank of England should have moved much sooner to increase them to 1.5, or whatever. Now, I can't you're the economist, not me, and the reasons why they didn't. But because they didn't do that, they've had to move them much quicker and faster. And I think everyone was spoilt. It was too easy for everyone. You and I we sound old, I sound old. Remember the days where it was 10, 15%. There's always arguments, oh, well, yeah, but property was less money then and all this. It might have been, but in reality, we're now where we should be. I mean, if you can fix, and I think by next year, the fixed rates will come down a bit in my view. If you can fix at 4.5%, you've done well. I fixed all my portfolio last year at 4.1%.
Huge value. Let me unpack that. Yeah. When you say fix, are you talking for 5 years?
For 15 years.
15? Yeah. Wow. So John's not talking 5 years, he's talking about fixing it 15 years.
I fixed it all 4.1% last year.
And you're happy with that decision?
Delighted. And I can pay 10% off without any penalties.
Per year?
Per year, yeah. And
do you know what? Take that as one of the golden nuggets of what John has given. And when you look through this podcast, John has just put 40 years, and I wish we could speak for much, much longer with John. And John's given us so much insight. It's unbelievable. And when you watch this podcast, you're going to realise the depth of experience of this gentleman and why you need to be speaking to people at this calibre or listening to people of this calibre, because they give you the huge value. This is what cuts your learning curve. And I speak to so many entrepreneurs, John, and they don't invest time and knowledge into listening to people and then adapting it to their style. Yeah, because everyone's in a different part of the journey. Of course they are. When someone's over here and you're here, you got a huge amount you can learn and use that information to make
not only that, I in the last few years, speaking at these events, listening to other people who are speaking and talking to people in the audience, I've learned things. So it works both ways. But if you want to hear more from what I do, I'm on Instagram, Twitter, apparently, and also TikTok, as well as my YouTube channel. So there's lots of free information they can get on there.
So in this podcast, in the details below, and my team will be doing this, we'll put all John's details in there so you can contact John and see all the amazing stuff that John's doing. There's going to be exclusive stuff around Property Graduate, because when this comes live, there'll be Property Graduate coming, and that's got a huge amount of value as well. And I would ask anyone, make sure you follow John, because the knowledge and experience that you've noticed, and he can actually chat. Yeah, he may not agree with everything. He may kill you a couple of times with a joke and that, but that's part of the journey, and he'll give you huge value. John, thank you so much. It's been a privilege. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed the Next Level Finance podcast with the legendary John Howard, and he loves me saying that, and you'll hear him say a few words now on it, but that's what I was talking about, legend, because the value. He's given 4 decades worth of information to us and high level value which you can apply, and hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much. Hi everyone, I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the podcast. We're doing this to add value to your entrepreneur journey, which is have a quick catch up on this is that, just to remind you, we've got free business guides in the comments below. They got huge value in them for property investors, property developers, SaaS pensions, and if you've got growing trading business as well. If you, after you consume those guides that have got exclusive Sky TV episodes in them, please do get in contact with us. The contact details are there, and we can help shape your entrepreneur journey and unlock financial freedom. Thank you so much.